Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for the introduction. And we got a really exciting panel today because just earlier today, you probably watched the debate between Nouriel Rubini and Arthur Hayes, and they're talking about, scaling is not possible on blockchain, apparently, and we're all going to zero. It's like, no scaling, we're going to zero. It's all Dr. Doom speech. But obviously, we're coming up with new solutions, and some involve, different off-chain scaling, some involve on-chain scaling. We're going to discuss all of that today. We're also going to discuss a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages, because we don't really talk about that too much all the time. Sometimes we occasionally see everything's the best, but sometimes we also want to critique some techniques as well. So that's what I want to focus on today's panel. So for starters, let's do a mini introduction of all the wonderful guests that we have here. So let's start with Patrick, and we'll go around for our mini discussion first.
Okay, so here's Patrick. I'm the co-founder and also the chairman of Quantum Foundation. So for Quantum, we are building the smart contract on the UTXO model. Basically, it's like a smart contract for Bitcoin network. Yeah, but we changed the consensus to proof of stake, and it's been global trading. It's a project 2 years right now. It's a top 30, like a cryptocurrency. The volume is pretty good. Yeah, maybe few $100 million per day. Yeah, being traded widely. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So we also have Tao.
Hi, my name is Tal. I'm the co-founder of Orbs. Orbs is a public and permissionless blockchain aimed for enterprises, and that is a weird combination. You don't hear that about that a lot. And that is interesting in terms of scaling because it allows you to approach scaling problems in a different way that permissionless blockchains usually cannot. So we'll talk about that and our approach to cost. I think cost is a very interesting thing about scaling because you need to scale the fee model as well and not only speed of transactions processing.
And we have David.
Yeah, hi. I'm the founder of Saito. We're also a scalable public blockchain. Where we're different, I suspect, from most people in the space is that we think there are fundamental economic problems with proof of stake and proof of work, and that the solution to scaling is actually to fix those.
All right. Kenichi.
Hi, I'm Kenichi Kurimoto, CEO of Nayuta Corporation. Nayuta Corporation is a Japanese cryptocurrency-related startup. We develop writing network software following Blockstream and Writing Lab and H-Sync. We are contributor of Writing Network protocol specification, and we are also developing the application of Writing Network. So we are doing a lot of things with related to Writing Network.
Right, and lastly, Gabriel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Cardona. I am the Director of Developer Services at Bitcoin.com, and I'm the creator of BITBOX SDK. So prior to the BTC BCH fork, I was actually creating a 3D printer startup, and the goal was to basically connect the 3D printer to the Internet of Things over MQTT, and then if somebody sent a smart contract on Ethereum, fire off a print. And I learned about the Truffle framework, which is absolutely amazing development environment, and I decided to pivot out of that startup and recreate that entire workflow in the BCH environment. So we have BITBOX SDK for doing BCH transactions, and we have SLP SDK for doing tokens, we have cloud services, and then we also have CashScript, which is a high-level Solidity-like smart contract language which compiles down to BCH script.
Awesome. So let's start off with our discussion about our targets for scaling as well, because when Satoshi Nakamoto first published the white paper, a lot of critics were like, hey, cool story, but you're never going to scale. We saw scaling at 7 transactions per second for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin transactions blowing up to almost 100. So this is why this became a very critical issue in a lot of people's minds. Now, can we see if we can actually have a consensus on what the applications that we're going to use it for and the target TPS, like target transactions per second you want to aim for? So let's start with Patrick. I guess we'll go in circle.
Yeah, I think people have some misunderstanding on the scaling and also the scaling solutions. Yeah, personally, I think for Bitcoin, Bitcoin need more transaction, but also Bitcoin, the core value of Bitcoin, it's not the speed. Yeah, because if you want to use the speed, the traditional banking service can make it faster. Yeah, but why not you are trusting the fiat money? You want some Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is more like, the core value is about the decentralization. It's about something you can control by yourself. Yeah, so that's a core value. The scaling or the speed is not the core value of Bitcoin. Yeah, but if we are talking about applications, I mean the blockchain applications, then I mean the scalability is very important, because without scalability, we have no applications at all. Yeah, so I think people have the misunderstanding. So for Bitcoin's scaling solution, I think the layer 2 is a good direction to go. The Lightning Network or like a more design on all the layer 2 like solutions for the transaction. It's a good way to go. But we still need to insist the core value of Bitcoin is like how can you make Bitcoin like be very secure, stable, like a blockchain. Yeah, I mean not really blockchain. Bitcoin is not really like a blockchain platform. Bitcoin is one of the best like a currency right now. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So do you agree with that, Tao, or do you have a separate opposing view?
Well, my perspective is less about payments. I think about blockchain as something broader that is also used for applications. And I think blockchain for applications presents insane challenges because, it's already difficult and challenging to do consumer scale applications on centralized infrastructure. If you try to decentralize that, the challenges are immense. And I personally think that the biggest problem that we have when we're trying to approach that is to solve the costs problem. Because right now we have incentive models that they behave as there is more demand, prices increase. And this is insane. If you think about application infrastructure like AWS, the more demand there is, prices should decrease. And we don't think about these things this way. So we have the incentives wrong. And I think I agree with my friend here that incentives are the main thing that we need to address. But I'm looking at it from a different perspective in terms of, you asked about optimum TPS, for example, what we aim for, and it's obviously the maximum that we can get, but the problem is, how do we get past those limits? And getting past those limits is an incentive problem because often in many platforms, the network or the validators or the miners are not incentivized to go past those limits. They're actually incentivized to stop at the limits to increase prices. And so unless we find fee mechanisms and incentives structured to solve around that, we won't go anywhere. So this is, in my eyes, the most important problem to solve.
I love this guy. Let me follow on to that. Yes, transactions per second, if someone is talking about that and that's their primary metric, it means they don't understand the real problem. And I'm just going to maybe chip in with something. We have the Ethereum network, for instance, which is doing a lot of transactions per second. And people think this is a great thing. Not a lot of people know that Infura, Joe Lubin's company, is essentially controlling the vast, vast majority of fees that go into this network. So the developers are working on fault tolerance and consensus systems, and there's this monopolistic network layer, which is encouraged by a bad incentive structure within their proof-of-stake system. No one thinks this is a problem. It's a huge problem. This is actually the problem that at Saito we think you need to solve. And what you need to do is you need to fix the incentives so you don't get these monopolies in the network. And the way you do that is by fixing the incentives so the network itself is self-sustainable. It gets the money where it needs to go so you get competition. And that has nothing to do with transactions per second, except that when you fix it, the transactions per second problem is solved organically because the money goes to the people who can do that most efficiently.
Okay. Bitcoin and Ethereum have already experienced time when transaction cannot be processed in short time. So scaling solution is essential for every cryptocurrency in early phase, I think. And I saw the tweet from the Alipay official account, which say that they accomplish 250,000 transaction per second. It's good to benchmark for the cryptocurrency, I think. But many people, there are a lot of people who think the blockchain is suitable for base layer of IoT, Internet of Things. So the number of devices will increase more and more comparing to the number of people. So we need 100 to 1,000 times more larger TPS for that area.
So in the context of what applications I think best sing on the blockchain, I think, of course, worldwide commerce, the Internet of Things, smart contracts, tokens, decentralized finance. I think these all lend themselves very well to the blockchain, even having some form of identity, being able to carry your identity with you across the web. You know, today, Bitcoin Cash can do about 100 transactions per second. We have 32 megabyte block size, but our roadmap is very aggressive, and we want to be able to do 5 million transactions a second. And so we're talking about terabyte blocks and beyond. And of course, that's like a meme in this community, and I understand that. But in the same way, a megabyte was a lot of data maybe a generation ago. You know, in 1955, a terabyte was $1 trillion, $1 a byte. But you wouldn't be able to create a terabyte because the hardware didn't exist, right? So there's this combination of the hardware and software improving that brings the cost of everything down. So today, a terabyte seems like a lot. But for example, in our November hard fork last year, we turned on canonical transaction ordering, which was the first step in order for Graphene, which was created by Gavin Andreasen and a team, which is a block propagation protocol, which uses inverted Bloom lookup tables to do set reconciliation between the nodes, and it's 10 times more effective than the current block propagations. And of course, we have UTXO commitments for doing quicker block syncs. We have Schnorr signatures, which solve transaction malleability, so we can do Lightning Network as well. And we have a host of other technologies. So I think that for us to do worldwide commerce, Internet of Things, smart contracts, blockchain, tokens, decentralized commerce, I think we do in fact need to talk about millions of transactions a second. Again, we're shooting for 5 million transactions a second, but it could be, you know, give or take a million or so above or below that. And then again, we're talking about terabyte block size, but we want to make our block size dynamic. So instead of saying we have a 32 megabyte block size, we have whatever it takes to get the job done.
All right, so we got some different discussion topics. So I'm going to try to combine everything. We're going to have a separate discussion also for the incentives, because I think that's really important. But for now, from the kind of block size point of view, right? So I think Gabriel brought up some issues about like, okay, we could go from 32 to a terabyte to even more larger block sizes on layer 1 scaling. Do you guys think going bigger blocks is a good solution, or do you think, you know, layer 2 is promising enough to use for currency global payments?
Yeah, I think that depends on how you think what's the purpose of your blockchain. Yeah. So if your purpose of blockchain is to build the currency, I mean, in this industry, we have two basic concepts. A lot of people misunderstanding each other. The one basic concept is a currency, yeah, cryptocurrency, yeah. And another one is a blockchain platform. I think it's a totally different concept. So if you think you want to build a very good cryptocurrency, I think the on-chain scalability or like to increase the block size, it's not really a good solution to go. Because that will make your block size become bigger and bigger. Then only few of the people or few of the institution have the ability to run like a network. Then what's the meaning of the blockchain? Then you should use all the banking service already being run by all the big like institutions, yeah. So if you want to build your blockchain as a platform, like encourage people to build other applications on that, then the currency maybe it's not the most important thing for you. You want to be a platform, you want to be the best platform, then I think it's okay to do the on-chain like scaling. You can have like a terabyte block size, it's okay. As long as you can offering the service, the stable service like Amazon Cloud or Google Cloud, then no one blame you because you give people the best experience, yeah. But if you are using a centralized way to build a currency, I think it's more like it's not a true story. It's a fake story, and you want everyone believe the fake story. I think that's gonna not happen in the long term. Yeah.
I see. So you see there's a difference between the use of a currency versus the use of like platform.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you agree with that?
Yeah, perfectly. This is exactly my point. I think when you're trying to design a platform that does both a currency well and a platform for apps well, you're going to miss on both. So you should focus on one of them. And if you're focused on applications, for example, this is the area that Orbs is focused on, then block size is not the low-hanging fruit. Of course, you should increase block size to what enables you the most, but you have a lower-hanging fruit that you need to do, and that is isolation between apps. Because if you look at the numbers, you see that 95% of the transactions to an app only has to do with this app's own state. You see only 5% of transactions cross apps. And when this is the reality, you can devise an architecture around it that you basically give separate blocks per apps. And when you do that, then you can scale indefinitely with a number of apps, and this is insane. So basically, you would get unlimited block size.
So you're talking about internal transactions within an application, but what if that 5% chance that they need to cross that platform? You still have to face some scaling issues, because one thing that we saw with Ethereum is that there's constant blowups on Ethereum too, where a certain app just on this certain date decided to break the network and say, look, we want to make gas prices shoot up to 100 or something like that. How do you prevent those random rogue apps from kind of taking over your network?
So this is exactly where isolation comes through, because when you have isolation, you can actually guarantee every app a guaranteed throughput. And this is the game changer, because what is scary about apps, that you have one app that becomes insanely popular, like CryptoKitties, and then it kind of consumes all the bandwidth of the network, and fees become very expensive for all other apps, and they can't really operate. So you don't have that when you have isolation. So basically what we do, we actually have parallel consensus streams for every application, and they're processed together by the same pool of permissionless validators. So this approach can let you scale very nicely without hitting those limits on fees. And I think this is the way to attack it. I think that you would see, for example, if you're trying to build a consumer app, then it's actually even a larger percent that is only transactions within the app. The transactions cross-app, you could even consider them like transactions cross-blockchain, and they could be slower and more expensive. You could even have consensus dedicated to that runs in the background, but this is not the mainstream in my eyes.
So it's all about isolation. Do you agree with that, David, or do you want everything to be together?
I disagree. I think the focus should be building a blockchain that works and moves data at scale, and you let the market decide how to structure things on top of that. What I'd say block size isn't a problem. Of course, you can increase it. We do at Saito. Of course, we also have market rent for data on chain. We have a consensus mechanism that will pay you if you attach your Raspberry Pi to the network and you deliver value. And for me, the big frustrating thing in some ways about the block size debate is it's the same with this, transactions per second. People are talking about this technical metric, and the underlying issue is actually the economics of the matter. And when you solve those, you actually solve the rest of the issues. And I'd like to see more focus on that.
Got it. I can.
From the viewpoint of computer science, there are no complete scaling solution of decentralized system proportional to the number of transactions, proportional to the number of nodes. So it means that the scaling solution is how to adapt to practical problem, practical needs. And scaling solution is architecture design selection, I think. So all scaling solution has pros and cons. So, but I don't know the detail of big block solution technology, but I feel it tends to lose censorship resistance. And Bitcoin Core selected that decision not to change layer 1 as much as possible. I like its decision because it's very safety.
Sure. So even though I'm in BCH and it's probably very easy to paint me as a caricature of an extreme viewpoint, I actually am not a maximalist in any way, and I believe that the best path forward for anything is always in the middle, and it's always best to strike a balance between extreme viewpoints. So though I am a big advocate of terabyte-sized blocks, because I think that's completely reasonable in a short timeline, definitely within our lifetimes, but we're talking a decade or less, I also think layer 2 is incredibly compelling, and I think there are great use cases for the Lightning Network. For example, I used to have a 3D printer startup. If you have 100,000 3D printer machines all connected to the Internet of Things and they need to shuffle one Satoshi between all of them relatively instantly, that's a great use case for the Lightning Network, and you're not going to be able to do that on-chain, full stop. So therefore, you can see use cases for the Lightning Network. What I think the folly is completely stopping innovation on layer 1 in hopes that this layer 2 thing takes off. And I think despite the price, because to me price is the least interesting metric of all, so if you tell somebody, you know, to me BTC seems to have stalled out, they'll say, what are you talking about? It's worth so much more than every other coin out there. But the truth is the technical innovation on BTC feels to me to be moving the slowest out of all the coins or chains or whatever. If you come to conferences like this, and I'm sure we all do all the time, it's shocking how much computer science innovation is happening in so many different ecosystems. So I like to say the middle ground is it will be a sweet spot between both of them. We will, in fact, have huge blocks, terabyte and beyond. I mean, you know, how long will there be sentience in the universe? Will there be petabyte blocks? Will there be even larger blocks? Presumably, yes, there will, because these are engineering problems. And given a long enough runway, we will, in fact, solve these problems. But I don't know that I draw the distinction between the money and the distributed applications. Obviously, I know there's a big difference between sending somebody a payment and then running some like DApp, but I kind of abstracted a step above that, and I think really what we have is we have a platform which gives us a set of primitives and we can build things with them. Well, one of the applications we can build is currency, another one we can build is CryptoKitties, and another one we can build is keep going and going. But to me, I don't draw that fine distinction between the currency and the application. And I think the final thing that I want to mention is just that, at least where I'm sitting, and everybody has their own viewpoint, and I understand that, to me, decentralization isn't even what matters. You know, what really matters is censorship-resistant, peer-to-peer electronic cash for the internet nation. That's the play here, and that's the idea whose time has come, and you cannot stop an idea whose time has come. And so to me, we only want enough decentralization to achieve the goal of censorship resistance, and as long as there's enough decentralization to get censorship resistance, then we've achieved our goal and we can all sleep good at night. So to me, I feel like making the religion all about decentralization and, oh my gosh, if we even scale up the blocks to 2 megabytes, it's a slippery slope, and all of a sudden it's going to be all centralized at one server farm in Beijing. I don't buy that argument, number one. And I think that the focus should be on censorship resistance and bringing financial freedom to people around the world, and that should trump decentralization.
Some bold words there. All right, so we have some agreement, some disagreement, but something that's kind of interesting here is all we're looking at the angle, the problem with different angles. Because obviously something that we've seen over the past few years, especially last year or during the ICO rush, was all these new blockchains promising 1 million TPS and beyond. Now, obviously, Patrick, I think you alluded to this earlier, where you're talking about how Bitcoin as a currency, maybe the core value is not scalability.
Yeah.
So you alluded to the fact that like there is a trilemma here, where if you have more scalability, maybe you might sacrifice on decentralization. Do you believe that there's other scaling technologies out there that do sacrifice too much on decentralization, or some sort of technologies out there that are promising too many transactions per second but don't make sound money for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debates on the decentralization, but the problem is like we are in the early stage of the industry, so we have no standard or no criteria like what's the decentralization. We have no definition yet, yeah, and we have no definition on a lot of things, yeah. So people are just talking. Everyone have the ideas. Everyone have their own like thinking, yeah. But personally, I think no matter what kind of, because for all the centralized technology, we have so many solutions. Yeah, the Satoshi Nakamoto, he gave us some like a brave idea, like we want to build a peer-to-peer electronic e-cash system. So, but for all the and build the like a Satoshi Nakamoto, like a consensus, the proof of work like a consensus. But for all the centralized not a centralized consensus. I mean, for the decentralized network, we have many consensus, like all the BFT or PBFT. It's already become a matured like area in the computer science like industry. Yeah, many talented people worked in this area. Yeah. But you know, a lot of projects today, like they are using different consensus. Yeah. But I think the one thing like that meaningful is like you always should have the right to verify or validate everything by yourself. Yeah. So that's a key point or the key idea. If you give up that key idea, then you can just turn back or go back to the maybe 20 years ago. You have so many centralized technology you can use to build a better, like everything can be better. Yeah. So Bitcoin is not come out to make everything better. Bitcoin is come out to make something different. Yeah. So that's the thing that make Bitcoin different.
And something that's different is censorship resistance. Do you agree that censorship resistance is the most important, and maybe we can sacrifice a little bit of decentralization along the way, as to what Gabriel was talking about? You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, for Bitcoin, I think the decentralization is the most important thing. Not the scalability, not the speed, not the performance, but something you control by yourself. Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to mention is like all the consensus model, like for the proof of work, well, you should always have a gateway for people to validate what's happening for the on the internet for everything. Even for today, you know you can solo mine Bitcoin. Even the possibility is very low, but you still have the chance to mine a block by yourself. That means like no one can really make sure you can cheat. You can always cheating everyone because someone else may have the possibility to mine a block. But for all the other consensus like a protocol for depots or BFT, you are the selected people. Yeah. So for the newcomers, you never have a chance to validate everything by yourself. But Bitcoin still makes this thing open. The possibility is there. You have the chance to validate everything by yourself. Yeah. Do not trust, but verify by yourself.
So trust, verify, that's the most important. If you can't do it, then that's a faulty blockchain. How about...
I completely agree. I think this is the difference between permissionless and permissioned in a sense that the fact that anyone can join in and anyone can verify, it has to be public. But I do agree that you don't need to verify everything, and most people don't care about everything. They care about a single app usually. So Bitcoin is a single app. You would want to verify its entirety. But when you have a blockchain for multiple apps like Ethereum, for example, usually a user of a single app would suffice by validating or auditing this app only. So this gives a very good use case for the isolation I mentioned earlier, because if you shard inherently the apps, you make this validation very easy, and you can scale almost indefinitely. So this is a good approach. I also want to talk about the trilemma that you mentioned. So the trilemma was a little 2017 problem because, you know, we could always, we had to sacrifice one. But I think in the last 2 years, we've seen many promising technologies that are allowing us to scale without sacrificing decentralization too much and without sacrificing security. So there are, for example, many cool ways to do this with random committees, for example. So one approach that we're taking to this problem is we have, for example, 1,000 nodes, and we want to do consensus, let's say, with 50 of them or with 20 of them. So every block, we would choose a random committee from the group. And since you can do that with threshold encryption in a way that you cannot predict the next committee from the first one, then you can prove that this is as secure. Maybe not 100%, but let's say 80%. So you could get a lot of benefits and the trade-offs in the middle, and you don't have to sacrifice one completely. I think there are many other solutions to these problems. Polkadot, you have mentioned, has several promising ones with Grandpa. So overall, I think the future is bright, and we see technologies that can scale all three dimensions without a huge sacrifice.
How about you, David?
I actually think the scalability trilemma is the most poisonous idea in blockchain. I think it stems not from a generic property of blockchain. I think it stems from the collective action problems that are in proof of work and proof of stake, and a monolithic security function so that, you know, if you take any money from the person providing that, your network is weaker. And I mean, a very simple example, if the biggest risk and threat is censorship resistance and centralization is your problem, anything that is going to take money away from that central and fund decentralization and fund the network is going to increase your security. And, you know, Saito, there are various ways in which you can move money around that increase all three, depending on the structure of the network. It's a more complicated security environment. You know, just pulling it back, I'd like to say one of the reasons I find it frustrating is Vitalik asked it as a question. He said, is it that there is this thing? And I think what's happened is everyone has leapt onto it because people don't have solutions to the problems, and they don't want to look within proof of stake and realize that proof of stake has problems. So instead everyone says, oh, it's trade-offs. We're making this trade-off, they're making that trade-off. And well, maybe you shouldn't be making trade-offs. Maybe you should solve the actual problems and see where that gets you instead.
Lightning Network is carefully designed to keep characteristics of decentralized currency, Bitcoin characteristics, and it already works on the mainnet. So, and there are a lot of things to do for mass adoption. So we just do it. We don't have to blame other technology of scaling solution.
Right, so it's all about building on top, basically. It's another network that's there. So Gabriel, finally, we have you on our side. So do you agree that you have to have permission, like a permissionless system, and be able to verify? Can you even verify if there's 1 terabyte block sizes? Anyone can verify.
Sure. So my headphones are on, I apologize. So yeah, I think one thing I try not to do is to be a member of the cult of Satoshi, and so I try not to appeal to authority too often by quoting Satoshi. You know, Satoshi created something very amazing, and he or she or they gave us a great roadmap, and then due to whatever reason, they stepped away, and now we are here to figure this out on our own. So I'm going to, you know, sort of go back to the white paper right now, but not in an appeal to authority kind of a way, but more in sort of a foresight kind of way. So, you know, Satoshi says very clearly in the white paper that we're going to end up with some type of centralization where there's going to be data servers or, you know, data server farms. And to me, it's very similar to, you know, I have, you know, hundreds of machines virtualized on the cloud right now. How many machines do I have in physical co-location facilities? Probably an order of magnitude less. We have a couple of co-los around the world. But I don't want to have to deal with maintaining my Ubuntu instances. I don't want to have to do security patches. I would rather outsource all of that to somebody who makes that their headache, and then I pay them for application as a service or software as a service or platform as a service or whatever. And so I believe that the same model will apply to blockchain, and that's certainly what we're building at Bitcoin.com. That's what my team is building, pro-tier services, which will allow people to basically host their applications on our cloud, et cetera. So I think that, to me, if we're talking about really running a worldwide financial system, which is, I'm more focused on the financial thing than the distributed apps, I don't think it's realistic to have every single person in the world validate every single transaction in the same way that I don't believe it's realistic to have every single web developer in the world host.
But what you're saying is they should pay you money, right? They should pay you money to rent some time on your servers and say, look, you know, I want to verify what's happening on the blockchain, so I have to go to like I have to get really sophisticated equipment. Why can't they just verify it themselves naturally on their own computer?
Well, they can. They can use SPV. I mean, they don't have to run a full node to validate their own transactions for what it's worth. Again, these problems are solved. I think it's a false dichotomy to say that you have to run your own full node and to be able to validate your own transactions. But sure, pay us to run your apps, but not only us. 100% of our infrastructure is open source, so we encourage competition because in the free and open marketplace of ideas, competition drives better competition and battle-hardened ideas rise to the top, and that's what provides the innovation which brought us to the modern state of the world. So yes, go out and pay people who specialize in those skill sets to help you outsource the problem and burden from your tech stack so that you can focus on the value add that you bring to the table.
Interesting. So Patrick, do you agree with that? Can you outsource some sort of validation of the network, or do you have to do it yourself?
Not really. Yeah, not really. The reason is like, I mean, if you do that in that way, I think the banking service is something similar. They already offering. Yeah. So yeah, I still like the core idea. Like you can control the key or like verify everything by yourself. Yeah. I think that's the only way we can against the real world. If some risk happens in the real world in the financial system, that's something like you can control in a virtual blockchain world. Yeah.
Right, so it's different. Okay, how about anyone you guys want to contribute to that? Do you guys agree or disagree with this like outsourcing validation? You must verify yourself. What do you guys think?
I think that you have to outsource eventually. because, I mean, when people have the choice who they outsource to, it's kind of like they're doing it by themselves. Because you didn't build the computer that you bought it from somebody, and it's just a different problem, okay? So you can rent the computer from somebody, but the fact that you can switch this person to somebody else, and it's your will, and you chose who does it, and you can change frequently and see that you get the same results, I think that is enough. You can't expect people, you know, to put bit by bit and build their own computers and be 100% safe that they did everything by themselves. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
I'll just chip in very shortly. I think one of the dark, dirty secrets of blockchain that people try to forget is that all security is eventually bought with transaction fees. And so if you want the most secure network, you have to validate or process the data. And if you're not willing to do that, move to a less secure chain that has less data, or ask someone to do it for you with SPV processing. But you always have the choice. You're never going to get a maximum amount of security processing only a minimal amount of data.
Yeah, we're going to run this panel a little bit longer than normal right now, so I hope you guys don't mind.
Okay.
Wait. Oh, okay, so we're...
Yeah, they're here.
Okay, they're here. Okay, cool. So let's wrap the session up. Sorry, I had a miscommunication error there. So I think then we'll thank everyone here for coming on the panel. Thank you guys all for listening.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for helping me.